Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to You've Championed Yourself. Who are you? I'm Chris Ferguson, your host. It has always been a dream of mine to showcase ordinary people doing extraordinary things in their lives for themselves and for others. Those who have taken their dreams, their ideas, and then turned it into their reality. As they reach beyond their personal struggles, their personal pains, and their traumas, where so many gave up, they lose hope. There are those few who can walk through their obstacles and challenges. They don't know where it's taking them. They don't know where it's going to end up. They just trusted themselves enough not to give up in their personal life, in their career, and in their relationships. This is what I call a champion in life. Today, I have an amazing author here. Her name is Cindy Holbrook, and she took what she experienced in life and turned it into books. So let's welcome Cindy here to the podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm honored. I'm honored. And the thing is we were talking before we started recording. I use poetry also to get out my anger, to the feelings of my abuse in my life.
Mhm.
I didn't speak it to anybody. I didn't have a voice. So can you talk to my audience about your backstory and what you went through that made you become a writer?
That's a big question. First, I would like to say I do go by Cindy J. or Cindy J. Holbrook, and that's to differentiate myself from the Harlequin Romance writer Cindy Holbrook.
I've never heard of her because I've never read one of those books.
I get emails all the time saying, "Are you Cindy Holbrook, the Harlequin Romance writer?" So I've added my middle initial in there to try to differentiate. So if somebody's searching for me on Amazon, I'm not the Harlequin Romance writer.
Well, that'll all be in the description when it goes out. So
okay, and so, anyways, growing up, I was sexually, physically, mentally abused by my father. I was also sexually abused by two family friends. From all of the, and then at 18, like so many people, because we learn, about life by watching our parents and by watching the family that we're in. So I married a man much like my father, minus the sexual abuse. And, I didn't realize how he was controlling me and how my past was even affecting my life. I've came to realize, number one, that regardless what you think you're doing right now, there's parts of your past that are affecting your life and your business today. And sometimes whenever you start doing the healing work and you start dealing with all this stuff, these layers of the onions, that proverbial onion that we all have to peel with our past traumas, they get less. And I believe that they only come to you when you're able to handle them. So it wasn't until I was 35 years old that I even realized I had a choice in my life. My first mentor told me, "Cindy, your life is your choice." I thought, lady, you are 100% totally off your rocker, because nobody would choose the life I'm living. Within the previous 2 years, I had experienced 4 deaths in my immediate family. My previous husband told me he didn't love me anymore, but was going to stay with me for the kids. And he was having a very strong emotional, if not sexual, affair with another woman. And my daughter had written a suicide note, and then she got involved with gangs. I felt very alone, very depressed, very suicidal. So to say that my life was my choice, I thought, lady, you're nuts, because nobody would want my life. But that's what started me on my personal growth journey. And as I grew, as I said, the onions, they can only come periodically. They can only come whenever you're ready to face them and see them. So I've actually had a lifetime of healing. I believe anybody that's gone through a lot of trauma has a lifetime of healing. And speaking about trauma, we rate trauma in our minds, but our bodies don't rate trauma. So when people hear my story, they automatically rate it a 10 or a 10 plus. However, what my body experienced and my emotions and my feelings and the way I dealt with it is no different than somebody who might rate their trauma as a 1. that their teacher said something bad to them, or their spouse said something bad to them, whatever it may be, an illness. There's so many different things that I have heard in my life of things that as human beings, we would rate that as a 1, but our body doesn't rate it. So don't think that somebody's life is worse than yours, or because they had it worse, they felt different, because I really feel our bodies is what remembers, and our bodies is what we have to reflect upon. So, so as I started growing with my personal growth journey, I got up the courage to leave my first husband. Within a year, I met my current husband. This was another major point in my life, because at that point in time, I would tell people I was physically abused and I was sexually abused, but I thought mental abuse was a bunch of hogwash. So my husband was visiting me. We were dating, and he lived 2.5 hours away from where I lived. So he was there, and my son had the football team over. So we decided to get away from all the boys. We'd go to a park and just chat. We stopped at a little place, and a fast food place, and got these 32-ounce sodas. So we're sitting in his truck drinking these sodas, and I spilled my soda all over the truck. And Mike jumped out, and he grabbed some rags he had in the back, and he started wiping the seat off. I curled up into a ball on the passenger side and started rocking and chanting, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Mike looked at me. I mean, I'll never forget the look on his face. He was so confused, like he was lost. And he goes, "Baby, you have nothing to be sorry about." I started sobbing because I was not used to being treated nice. If he would have cussed me out, told me I was clumsy, told me I effed up his truck, I could have handled that, because that's what I was used to.
Yeah.
But Mike sat in that wet, sticky seat for 3 hours as I sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. Mike always has this joke that nobody should get that upset over spilling a Coke. But that's whenever it dawned on me that I was very emotionally abused, and I was so far into the forest I couldn't see the trees. And so, we don't realize how our past is affecting our current choices so often. And then fast forward to, I started my coaching business in 2009. I began as a divorce coach, and then I morphed into being who I am now, Cindy J, the Visibility Wiz, where I help entrepreneurs gain confidence to be fully authentic and to be visible online. So I work with both the mindset and the strategies to do that. And I went to this business conference of Bill Barron, The Big Shift. He gave up his business a few years back. It's really sad. But he had over 800 people at this event. And during the last day, he cleared off all the tables, and he cleared out all the tables and chairs, and he had everybody line up on one side of the room. And he said, "If this resonates with you, I'm going to say several statements. If this applies to you, take a step forward. If not, stay still." And so he started saying, "You've been lied to. You've lied to other people. You've been abused. You've abused other people. You've hit somebody else has hit you. You've cussed. You've heard people cuss, just all these different things." And the whole point of it naturally was to show that we're all the same. We've all experienced crap that hurt us. And I started sobbing during this event. And this gentleman named Eric, and he was probably close to being 7 feet tall, came up to me and said, "Can you hug me?" And then I started sobbing more uncontrollably than I was before. And he sort of became my security blanket after that time. But Bill, as he stood up on stage, he said, does anybody want to share? And I felt compelled to share, but because we were in the back, there's no way I could be seen. But because Eric was so tall, when he raised his hand, he was definitely seen. So Bill called on Eric, and Eric went up there with me on stage. And I started by saying, it dawned on me, I've been playing small all my life because I've been afraid of big, strong men. And everybody started to laugh. And then I proceeded. I have this invisible sign, and I know I have it, like when I'm at events, for men to stay away from me. And I'm very used to women coming up and hugging me and asking for hugs, but something inside of me broke when Eric asked me. I realize now something inside of me healed, but I did say broke. And one of the gentlemen that was at my lunch table felt inspired to get up on stage and give me a hug. And within a minute, there's like 70 men on stage, like surrounding me in what everybody called Cindy's hug, with just pure unconditional love. So that was a really big healing moment for me, that all these men could love and support me without asking for anything in return. Because
or knowing you, or knowing your past, or knowing
exactly.
what you went through. It was truly unconditional love.
Yes, yes. And because before that, I just felt like men would squash me like an ant. So afterwards, I got so many people came up to me. And I mean, this was a short 2-minute thing. And they're like, wow, you helped me heal. Your past sounds like my past. What you shared helped me understand my wife more. Just, I could not believe all of the attention that I got from my little 2-minute stint on stage. That was the first time I ever spoke publicly about my past. But at that time, I did know that I had to write my story. And, I, for years kept trying to figure out, I wanted to write in a way where people understood what happened, but also where it could help heal other people. So many books on abuse end when the abuse ends, but that's not the end of the story in any way, shape, or form, because your past does continue to haunt you in so many ways, and you don't even realize it.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely understand that. And from a kid that was sexually abused, that
Mm-hmm.
was almost murdered by two girls in an orphanage, and not having loving parents, I understand that. And you get labeled. I want to say you get labeled. So all these people who want to label themselves now, I'm all against labels. I don't care what it is, because that doesn't define you.
Exactly.
And I
Exactly.
love the fact that you said, even though you have pains and you have traumas, everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
But it's what goes on between the two ears that we put ourselves through so much purgatory, so much hell for no reason, to realize that what happened to us wasn't about us. We
Right.
were the true victim.
Exactly.
So I
Exactly.
love the fact that you touched on that too. But a lot of people don't realize is that I, like you, I have to say this. I loved your opening statement when you say, I didn't choose this life. There's no way in hell I would have chosen this life. I said the exact same thing. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, being born of children children born of parents, both parents couldn't love them. My dad's Native American, my mother's white, and they both abandoned 6 kids in an orphanage because the Catholic Church said a single mom doesn't, 1, get divorced, and 2, can't raise 6 kids by themselves. So society norms is also an impact on
Definitely.
trauma. And most people don't realize that. So in that, I love the fact that you are using what you call those dark family secrets as a stepping stone to step out to empower. And that is amazing, because so many people can't. They don't know where to begin. They're ashamed. I know for years I was ashamed. And then as I started through my shamanic practicing, I found that it wasn't my shame.
Exactly.
This wasn't my story. This is what happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
It was somebody else's story. And I was just trying to survive it.
Exactly. I love the way you said that. Now, I want to follow up with a couple of things there. Culture and society and time. Now, whenever I grew up, there wasn't even a national child abuse law in the United States.
There
That
wasn't.
came in 1974. And I remember it so clearly because right after it passed, my father broke my ribs and all the way to the hospital. Don't you dare tell him I hit you. I mean, it was like this. And I didn't. I was more afraid of him than anything else.
Of course.
But I had a very loving mother, and my mom. I don't believe. My sister asked me once. She's like, "I wonder why mom loved you more." And I don't believe mom loved me more, but I know from my genealogy research, and because I've always been inquisitive and I've always asked family questions, trying to it's just who I am. And I know from all this that during my mother's pregnancy with me, she was living through hell herself. And it was interesting that it took me years to even find that she was abused. I never once heard my father yell at her. I mean, she was like the Stepford wife, if really saying my age here.
But no, I'm older than you, so just know I get the Stepford wives. Okay, I'm older than you.
But she knew her place, and so she was always did exactly what he wanted. By the time I came around, she knew how to act. But I never seen her as a victim growing up. It took me years to see that. But I never once heard my father and mother yell at each other. My father never hit my mother. And so it was just this interesting dynamic, but he was horrible to us. And he didn't drink, so he didn't even have that as an excuse. My aunt hated him forever. And it's my cousin. She was one of my beta readers, who I do speak about her in the book because I just looked up to her so much as a little girl. But she was like, man, if my mom would have known what was happening in your household, she would have pulled you out in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Because Aunt June, she used to always tell my mom, why do you stay with Frank? I don't understand why you stay with Frank. And my mother's reply was always, because he's a hard worker. He doesn't drink. And how would you expect me to raise 5 kids by myself? But going back to the trauma, when she was pregnant with me, she received a letter where my father received a letter that she opened. And it was from another woman stating that she was carrying my father's child. So there was this huge argument that ensued during that time. And my mom, I think, was probably pretty close to leaving him, but she told my dad, this is my child, not yours. I'm going to love it whenever I want to love it. I'm going to rock it whenever I want to rock it. And you're not going to say a damn word about it. Because my father would not allow her to, he believed, let the kids cry themselves to sleep. So if he thought that my mom was holding my siblings too long, she would get yelled at. But with me, it was something to do with this huge argument that took place, that he just let her give me the love that I know wanted to give my other siblings.
I'm one of 11 children. Okay. My youngest sister was born in 62, and I'm older than her. So that just tells you the timeline here. And she was born in February, and then my dad had another woman that he was seeing, and she was pregnant, and her son was born in August the same year. So it's like we've got parallel lives here going on. And so the fact is it's like, with that, I don't know how many children they had that they didn't, admit to, I want to say, own. But the fact is if for some reason in our household, when we were younger, it was all about us kids trying to keep them from killing each other.
Right.
The cast iron skillet, he'd come home drunk with some girl thinking he could have her there. It was craziness. So the fact is that I got labeled as a juvenile delinquent because my mother abandoned 6 kids in an orphanage.
Right.
And so the fact is that I understand your mom, but my mom was put in a position. I don't know. There's so many stories, so many lies, so many different things that I've heard through the family, that it's like, okay, I don't even know what to trust. I don't even know what to believe anymore. So I just leave it be, because they're both dead, and whatever they did in life, that's their karma.
Right.
And so the fact is that I was never able to deal with my accuser, or my the boy that molested me when I was 4.
Right.
And so in that, I felt that was an injustice. So did you ever confront your father?
Yes, I definitely confronted my father. My father definitely. As a matter of fact, when I was 16, maybe I was 15, he was teaching me to drive. My father always kept me quiet by saying, if your mother ever found out, I would kill her. So, it was like all of us kids. It was like everything, protect mom. And so besides the sexual abuse, there's a lot of sexual innuendos and just all kinds of crap. But when one time, whenever he was teaching me to drive, he had tried to start something and I lost it. Like something inside of me lost it. Now, again, this was like 75. Again, there's more talk about abuse in children than ever before
Yeah,
on
but
TV and stuff.
they didn't
And
have the care that kids needed
right,
to be
right.
protected. We
Mhm.
still don't to this day. I mean, we have things in place now, but it still happens.
Oh, exactly. I worked in social services for 20 years. Definitely understand, and it's sad, they're still trying, but it's so difficult for so many different reasons. But when my father, while he was teaching me to drive, and I lost it, and I pulled over to the side of the road, and we was on this big giant busy street, and I just started yelling and screaming at him, like, "You're never going to touch me. You're not going to talk to me about sex." I just like lost it. I was this crazy kid yelling and screaming. People were slowing down, like looking at us, sort of amazing. Nobody called the cops. Now my dad, like, is more afraid that stuff's going to come out, and he's going, "Shh, shh, shh, calm down, calm down." And I'm just like, "No." And he's like, "Get back into the car and we can discuss this." And I'm just like waving my arms, screaming at the top of my lungs, just all kinds of stuff. And finally, he told me, "I promise you, I'll never touch you again. I'll never talk about sex to you again. If you just please get into the car." And he never did. So why he kept his promise, I'll never know. Interestingly, before he died, he did ask me for forgiveness. Literally asked me for forgiveness, which I found interesting. And again, my poor sister will never understand some of the different dynamics, but my sister confronted him, and he just told her, "Don't tell Charlotte." Charlotte was a lady he had met after my mother died that was caring for him, um, after he found out he had a brain tumor. So my sister, like, "Well, why did he ask me and not my sister?" It's very interesting, the different dynamics. My sister always said that I had a harder time dealing with it. So I'm not quite for sure how much abuse she endured from him, versus me, simply because when she's 8 years older than I am. So when she was younger, all 5 kids were in the house. It was harder to find time. And I was basically living alone in that house from the time I was 12 on. But, people started, like, I don't remember ever living with my oldest brother. So as my siblings started moving away, for the most part, it's me and my brother, Paul. And I speak a lot about him. In writing the book, that was my biggest emotion. And what I really realized was that I still had survivor's guilt, because I got beat, but nothing like Michael Paul. I got hit. I never got beat, really. I mean, even whenever he broke my ribs, he hit me and I fell across the coffee table. But Michael Paul, my brother's name was Michael Paul. I call him Paul in the book to differentiate from my husband, Mike. But Paul got beat constantly, and me witnessing it, and oftentimes for things that him and I did together. So he was like this scapegoat. But in writing the book, that was my biggest emotion. One of my biggest emotions was like why, he just really had a hard life because of it.
Well, my question is did he think about this, just for reflect for a moment. And what I haven't told you is that I was in law enforcement for 40 years. And I've dealt with domestic violence. I taught women how to protect themselves.
Right.
And then I finally had this epiphany, and I'm like, why am I teaching women how to protect themselves? Why don't we teach our males not to assault?
Right.
That would heal the core. But the thing is we have to go back so many generations, and again, society norms, where they say, "Oh, we don't talk about those dark secrets, those family secrets. They stay, back here somewhere. Don't speak of it."
Yes.
And it's that silence that is the biggest trauma for somebody. But I guess my real question is was your brother, was he always told he wasn't enough? Was he always told that he messed up in life?
Both of us were. Both of us were.
Because of that, that's here's the thing is, as a deputy, I used to work and check up on sexual offenders. That was one of the things I did every month. And one of the things is they didn't like women telling them what to do or being in that control or power position. And so I see that, and I've seen that with other cases where there was a boy in the family, the father sexually assaulting one of the girls, and he tried with another one, but it didn't work because they told him they would hurt him and tell on him. So he got scared, but he kept assaulting the second one. And so the thing is the boy was the battering ramp. I want to say the battering ramp of the aggression. When he couldn't take it out sexually, he took it out physically on the male.
Exactly. Yeah. My father, he just was not a nice person. I even with all my genealogy, I'm sure that there is stuff, something had to have happened to him. I believe every baby is born innocent and worthy of everything. I don't believe that anybody's born evil. I just don't.
But I'm not of the same mind, but then I'm also a criminal profiler. So I have to tell you that part. So it's a good thought to try to ease your mind to think that he could have been born with some kind of abnormality in the brain, or his frontal vortex didn't advance like it should have, you know? So there's chemistry and different things that could account for this, but I think it is done through birth, and it's something that's never been studied.
And, you know, you was talking about domestic violence and, you know, you being called out. And I've always found this interesting. Now, my son, he was very adamant he was going to break the cycle, right? And I know when my grandson was 4 years old, he went to run out in a busy street, and Brian grabbed him and swatted him. And then Brian called me up crying because he hit him. And I'm like, well, this isn't like what you received, Brian. You know, I still believe that he has broken that cycle. But his girlfriend beat the holy crap out of him. And he called the cops more because he didn't want to hit her. And so he said, I knew if the cops were coming, I wouldn't hit her. And the cops were really, whenever he even told the cops that, the cops were so down on him. I mean, he had a black eye, and they're still like on the woman's side, which which is sort of interesting. So even whenever you have these men that are trying to do the right thing, women, and I'm sure you know this, can be just as horrific.
Absolutely. But here's the thing is that's why the laws change. So now it's who's got the marks. The other one goes to jail. If they both have the marks, they both go to jail. Yeah. So, times is evolving, but is it fast enough to help protect the innocent? No.
Yeah. Yeah. And, but with me, I even say, whenever I talk about trauma, we are raised and we just see things, and things become so normal to us that we don't think. And that's what, even like people ask me about sexual abuse. It was normal to me. I thought it happened in every family and nobody talked about it. It's just very normal. But when my ex and I, we argued, we yelled, but he never actually, quote unquote, hit me. He did do some things that are considered physical abuse, but for the most part, it was yelling. And that's what my children were brought up with, was us yelling and screaming at each other. My ex's brother and his wife would beat the holy crap out of each other. And so one time, through a series of events, because typically I didn't send my kids to their house to be babysat, then my kids were at their house. So my daughter was 5, my son was 4, and their cousins was 4 and 3. And they're sitting there, and both my kids remember this 100% today. They're sitting there watching cartoons, and their aunt and uncle get into this fist fight, and they are like, they're holding on to each other for dear life. They're traumatized by watching their aunt and uncle beat the crap, because they'd never seen adults do that before. Yeah. But my daughter especially, she's like, I looked over and my cousins are just sitting there watching the cartoons, laughing like nothing's going on. And I'm like, so even at such an early age, we are conditioned with our family, and that's what we know is life. And little things, like I said, we'll pick up whenever we're adults, because I honestly didn't think, whenever I first got married at 18, I thought, yay, I'm free, right? Don't have to deal with my dad no more. Everything's hunky-dory. And I was so wrong. I think for most people, whenever they get around 30, I think in your 20s, you're just like all nonchalant, but whenever you get around 30 is whenever you really start realizing and seeing how your past has affected you. And you have to deal with this crap in order to move on and lead a happy, successful, productive life. My ex-husband, he was the perfect mate for me. I probably couldn't have had children with anybody else because, like my current husband, he's always like, I'll never understand how Earl let your daughter around your dad. Never, ever, ever understand that. And I've had other men tell me the same thing. Like, how could Earl let Amy be around your dad? I'm like, because I was so close to my mom. With my mom came my dad. And I couldn't tell my mom because I didn't want to kill her because my dad always told me if she found out it would kill her. So, but Earl was an adult. I mean, it's textbook. You know, you probably know textbook adult child of an alcoholic. Textbook. You don't air your dirty laundry. You wipe everything under the rug and act like it doesn't exist. You just act like all these things aren't happening. And sadly, you know, he died before he was ever faced his own demons.
Well, he did face them. You know, you can't do this kind of karma in life and not have to face it at your demise, because you know, those religious stories where you face your maker on the things that you did in this life. And the thing is so yeah, I honestly believe that they meet their makers. Yes. What happens to them after that is on them. However, when you're the victim of this abuse, you're afraid that, oh gosh, are they going to come back in the afterlife and come after me? Because that's how much mental programming they've done for you in your life when they were living.
Yeah. So it's.
She can't talk right now.
Yeah, I can't talk right. Yeah, you can tell. Hopefully you can cut this out. Look in my purse and I don't know what else in there. Look in my wallet, both of those wallets. You have to unzip it. I'm so sorry.
Oh, you're good. You're all right. We'll do what we can.
Okay.
Sit silent for 10 seconds. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. That's interesting. You know, I know from like near-death experiences, and I'm not quite for sure what you were saying there as far as, you know, dealing with your past beforehand. I know he had a brain aneurysm and died just like that. So I don't know like how much he could have even processed before that. However, what I always found very interesting was him and my daughter, they were on the outs for years because she was attracted to Black men and he could not stand the interracial relationships. So whenever she was maybe 13 or 14, he told her he loved her. And it wasn't until 5 months before he died that he told her he loved her. So he did like try to make peace with both of my children before he died. We did find out that he had cancer. So maybe he knew and maybe that's why. But what actually killed him was the brain aneurysm. It's just like that. So it's very interesting. Now, earlier this year, I got COVID on January 9th, and I would feel better and get worse, feel better and get worse. On January 20th, around 12:15 a.m., my husband called 911, and the doctor said I wouldn't have lived through the night had he not called 911. I was in ICU for 3 weeks. I was on 100% oxygen for 2.5 weeks, but I was like in this state of, like my mother was with me the whole time. She would sing to me. She would rub my hair like she did when she was a little girl. And she kept telling me it wasn't my time to go to the other side. But it was a very interesting experience. But even with all that, and maybe because I have dealt with so much of my past, but like so many things, like to me, the most precious part of being sick was like really feeling and having my mother with me.
I get that. I absolutely get that. See, I've had 3 near-death experiences. One at 5, I drank liquid Drano under the sink because I was hungry, but they don't know why it didn't burn my esophagus, my throat and all that. The chemicals overtook my body and I didn't have enough oxygen, so I flatlined. So, and then at 16, I lost all hope. And in losing that hope, I had taken 32 phenobarbital
Yeah.
and went to sleep. Nobody checked up on me. I woke up 4 days later and I was a hot mess. I was mad. I was arguing with the creator. And so at that point, I turned to my shadow work. I turned to all the triggers inside of me,
Right.
all of those things that, I never spoke of to anyone. And in that process, I started doing the shadow work, the healing, the reflecting, understanding. Instead of saying why as a victim, I started saying, what was the reason why this happened? What's the lesson? And I think your book is Overcoming Dark Family Secrets. And I think with that reflection is the beginning step of freedom, emotional, mental, physical freedom. And so I'd really like to talk about, and I know your backstory has been all about this trauma and this pain that you went through, but how did you overcome it?
First of all, I think everything has to start with just being aware of your thoughts. We all, as kids, we all played knock, knock, who's there? Well, all these voices in your head, knock, knock, you're not good enough. You're not worthy. You're never going to amount to anything. You were born to serve men, right? To give men whatever they wanted. I mean, this was one that was in me. You're not a good writer. Who are you to think you can teach that? All these things, these are the knock knocks in our head, these voices in our head. The awareness comes in whenever you ask yourself, whose voice is it? Because 99% of the time, it's not your voice. It's a voice of your father, your mother, your brothers, sisters, teachers, clergy people, other family
Experiences,
friends, right?
subconscious.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I have two examples of that. One is, this is probably 4 or 5 years ago. I was talking to somebody and I go, I'm just bad with money. And I thought to myself, who said that? And is that true? Only one person in my entire life ever told me I was bad with money. Everybody else says I'm good with money. One person, my ex-husband. So I'm like, why am I letting what he told me, why am I letting it affect me? This isn't serving me. Another time, I went to a business conference and my roommate, she told me, oh, Cindy, that sweater makes you look fat and frumpy. No woman wants to hear that something makes her look fat and frumpy. And so she was like, you should never wear that sweater, out. I would only wear it like in your house. So for a couple of years, I only wore that sweater in my house. One day it was cold outside or chilly outside, and I had some errands to run. So I just put on my sweater and I went to 4 different stores. At each store, somebody stopped me and said, oh, you're so pretty. And that sweater just flatters you. And I love the sweater on you. And I'm like thinking, why did I let this one person, this one time, I don't even know, really and truly, tell me not how to dress, right? So I went home, and this is what I call outrageous confidence. It's doing something bold and unusual that you typically wouldn't do. Everybody doesn't have to think that it's bold and unusual, but it's bold and unusual for you. And so I put on my sweater, and I had my husband take a full-length picture of me, and I sent it to my email list with that story. Like, we all have things like that. And we like to think that we know the lies that we believe, but we don't know the lies that we believe. We believe things that are crazy, even that are lies. Now, somewhere in my life, I determined that my nephew was 8 years younger than me, my sister's son. So I turned 48 in June, and Marty's birthday is in August. So Marty comes to my house, like after my birthday, before his. I go, so Marty, you're going to be the big 4-0. No, Aunt Cindy, I'm going to be 39. Marty, stop bullshitting me. I know how old you are. I was there whenever you was born. Well, not there, but I seen you as a baby. I know when you were born. You stop lying to me. And I keep telling him, you're going to be 40. Like, no, Aunt Cindy, I'm going to be 39. His kids are telling me, Aunt Cindy, he's going to be 39. And my husband's like, he should know how old he is. I go, no, he's lying to me. My family likes playing tricks on me to get me to believe things that aren't true. And I was like adamant that's what was happening. I fought with him for an hour, literally an hour. Like, Marty, you're going to be 40. So finally, he just got fed up with me. He pulled out his driver's license. Aunt Cindy, look at the year I was born and you do the math. And I was like, holy crap, you're going to be 39. I'm like, if you believe me, anybody, if you can believe something that strongly,
Mm-hmm.
like how old somebody is even, what lies do we believe that aren't really true?
But are they lies or they are just excuses so we feel better?
Yeah, I think I call it the lies we tell ourselves.
Yeah, I tell it the
Yeah,
excuses we tell ourselves so we feel
and
better about ourselves.
I call them lies simply because we were led to believe this and has so much to do with our coping mechanisms. But they're lies that we were led to believe based on something somebody else said or based on our perspective of what happened during a certain event.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like, and I was sharing before we talked that I've always loved to write. I mean, when I was 6 years old, and I remember this, I had the chicken pox. I'm sitting on the table and I wrote this like 2-page story, right? And my mom thought it was so good, she put it in her special little brown box. And I thought, hey, it made me feel good. My mom, my sister always encouraged my writing. I would write little plays and things that me and my girlfriend, we used to like do it on the tape recorders, like, so I would like write these scripts and I would also like perform for my mom and my sister mostly. They were my biggest fans. And when I was in 6th grade, I wrote a 50-page story. And I can remember being at my grandmother's house for something, but I was like writing. And as soon as I would write a page, my sister would read it because my sister was so enthralled in this story and she typically doesn't read. I gave it to my teacher and my teacher thought it was such a good story. She had me type it out. She gave like one to all the 6th-grade class and she put it in the school library and she sent one to a publisher friend of hers. Publishing was a big thing at that time. Like, you couldn't just be not anybody could just be a published author. And so the publisher wrote back and said, you're very creative, you're a very good writer, you're going to achieve success at a very early age as long as you don't get discouraged. And so I kept writing. In 9th grade, 10th grade, I don't know. I know I had this teacher for a couple years. He was a published author and he was a hard grader. And I'm the only person that I know that got a B in his class. I didn't even get an A, but I'm the only person I know that got a B because it was a C. I did get an A on a couple of different things that I'd wrote, but he just was the hardest grader ever when it came to writing. Then when I got engaged to my first husband, I wrote this poem. So I would write both stories and poems and all kinds of stuff. And so I wrote this poem that I was going to read to him during the wedding. My father told me, oh, you should not do that. You will be a laughingstock if you do that. And in matter of fact, you should never let anybody read anything you wrote because you'll be a laughingstock. So I stopped sharing what I wrote with anybody. When I left my first husband, I was married to him for 20 years. I threw away 5 novels that I had wrote that nobody would ever read. Nobody did read. Nobody else would ever read. So I continued to write. Writing has always been my solace, my escape, be it writing fiction or journaling. I mean, writing has always been my release it's my happy place, right? But in 2000, I was thinking 9/11, 2001. Yeah, 2001. Because I opened up my first website the night before 9/11. And I was so excited, went to sleep like all excited that I had this website up. And then the next day it was 9/11. But I was selling pewter figurines using a drop shipper. And I had to write the descriptions for the pewter figurines to get people to entice them to buy it. And within 3 or 4 months, people were copying my descriptions. And I thought, well, I can't be that bad of a writer if people are copying my descriptions, right? And this was really the start of me starting to write in public. I mean, now you can find things that I've written, some good, some bad, like all over the place, because I have been writing online, with articles and for different places since 2009. Maybe even before then, but especially since I became a coach. It's in 2009. But that was a lie that I was led to believe. It wasn't like an excuse. That was just an outright lie that I would be a laughingstock if I shared my writing. So, I understand some things we use as an excuse. My husband, I was trying to do something. I go, I just can't do it. I don't know how to do it. He goes, you can't say that. I have seen you do remarkable things. But if you sit there and you say you can't do it because of whatever, or this is the way I've been and this is the way I'm always going to be, those are like excuses to me. Not the things like I'm a bad writer. That was like, or I would be a laughingstock. That was a lie that I was led to believe. So I can see where some are excuses and some are lies.
Yeah, the thing is, but here's why I call it an excuse. You accepted it, what you were told, and you listened to somebody else's opinion. And like everybody, we all have opinions.
Right.
So I'm the flip side of you. I never trusted anybody. I never listened to anybody. I couldn't dream as a kid because I didn't have that ability. And no one can tell me you can't do that. No,
you're my sister.
No one. I don't follow society norms just because of childhood. I don't follow trending stuff. I don't follow any of that. I do what I can live with. And if I like it, I mean, in 1983, I was published, first time I was published, and I'd written a poem called Cops Are People Too. And I didn't know how important it would be now compared to then.
Right.
And I was a dispatcher. I just knew about all the things I had heard in my ear. I had heard all the people. I've had people kill themselves in the phone. Right. I mean, the fact is, and that's all traumatic, but I knew it wasn't me and I had nothing to do. I was just being of service.
Exactly.
So with you getting into social work, I'm wondering how much of that social work was you giving back and being of service for those that could have gone through what you went through as a child.
Part of it definitely. And, I sort of fell into it. I mean, but I've always liked helping people. I've always liked that. And so even with social services I wasn't in the trenches where I wasn't like going to the houses. I was more the after fact of knowing what happened. However, like you talking about the suicide, there was one person who I would have to talk through till the cops got there because he was going to kill himself. And I remember thinking, I'm not a suicide prevention person. I haven't really been trained in this. I did have some training, but like as I'm talking to this guy on the phone, trying to wave down my coworkers and write notes to my coworkers.
Yeah, I mean, people don't realize that in that moment, you have to talk this guy off the ledge and out of crisis.
Exactly.
I was good at that. That's why I was a hostage negotiator for the prison that I worked at. And then I got into criminal profiling when I worked the streets. But I worked 40 years in law enforcement, 21 years was dealing with troubled youth. So that was my way of giving back. And none of these kids knew. So did your kids know that you were sexually abused and what you've been through? Or was one of those things you never spoke of?
No, they knew after my mother died, and not for sure how much they knew before my mother died. I always tell people too, whenever you read my book, everything that I talk about Amy, because she was a rebellious little girl, but all my stories about Amy are Amy approved because she is one of my editors. So, and I don't talk as much about my son because he's more quiet. The one story that I do tell, he's going, Mom, I hate that story. And he goes, if I write a book, can I write anything about you? I'm like, sure, as long as it's true or it's your perspective, I don't care. So sort of cute, but I'm like, Brian, people aren't going to think, people are going to think poor little 5-year-old boy. They're not going to think, what you think whenever you think about this.
Right. But then again, that's a fear-based statement that he's making because that fear of what people will think of him. And that's where you were controlled, and that's how they control people.
And exactly. When I was in social services, and this was always one of my favorite social service story, this girl came to my office and she was like, these aren't it's not the real name, but she was like, Johnny's getting out of jail next month and he's going to be moving back into my house. And I'm like, okay, well, you just need to let me know exactly when he's released and when he's there. And she looked at me and she goes, don't you think I'm stupid? I know you think I'm stupid. Everybody keeps telling me how stupid I am. And I knew, and she knew that Johnny was in jail for trying to kill her. I mean, I knew it, and she knew that I knew it. But I didn't tell her, you're stupid. And I told her, whenever she said that to me, I go, I don't think you're stupid at all. I think you're very beautiful. I think you're a smart, intelligent woman. And when you decide that you don't deserve to be treated that way, you will leave Johnny. And her face lit up and she's like, really? You don't think I'm stupid? You don't think I'm stupid? And to me, that is, and she did leave him within a year of that. She got her life together and she came back and she said, just me believing in her gave her that extra boost of encouragement that she needed. And so many people do, especially with abused wives. They're constantly, why does she stay with him? Why do she's so stupid, she's this. And you're hearing this, and all that does is deflate your self-esteem more and more and more. And I mean, I can remember like how deflated I felt with so many things, with my ex-husband. And even reading, my book, some people, have made remarks about, but I kept thinking if Earl would only love me again, my world would be right, because I was still looking outside for that love and acceptance. And it's all about looking inside for the love and acceptance. So as I start healing in my book, I've added what I call keys to worthiness, because I did not feel worthy of like anything. So I had to develop where I loved myself, where I felt worthy of good things. And that was, the biggest part of the healing is just facing what happened. And I always say, rewrite your story. You can't change your story, but you can, and you've rewrote yours. I heard a few things that you've said about it, because whenever you rewrite your story, you're changing your perspective on it. And that's how you heal. Because if you stay stuck in your story, then you stay stuck a victim. I personally do not like being called a survivor, because if I'm a survivor, I'm still giving these men that did horrible things to me power over my life. So I just simply state, I choose to be a winner in life. And that's what I want you to be. I want you to choose for yourself to be a winner in life.
I love that. I say something similar, but I use a pyramid. And you can either be the oppressor or the perpetrator, or you can be the victim and be stuck in victimhood. But if you have enough courage in yourself, it's not anybody else's opinion, it's what you think of yourself. You can climb that and become your own champion. Yeah. And so the thing is, or your own hero. And because there's not, those fairy tale stories, there's a white knight in shining armor and he's going to come save you. It is a crock of crap. Right. And you have to save yourself. But in those stories, those were fairy tales to deal with trauma and pain when you really think about it. Yes. So was that truly indoctrination from these people that wrote these books, that they were indoctrinating children how to deal with traumas and pains? Because the bottom line is always there's a hero, there's a villain, and then there's the victim. Right. And so the fact is let's tell a story where people can be born, be accepted for who they are, what they think, and have the tolerance and the patience and the respect for an individual. And not be about labeling or in hatred or, all of that stuff. So humanity is harder on itself than anybody could ever be harder on them.
We're the hardest on ourselves. Now, one time I yelled at my mother and I felt so guilty, right? Like within minutes, like I'm apologizing to her. And then every day, like for the next week, I was calling her 2 to 4 times a day. Mom, I am so sorry for yelling at you. And finally, she's like, damn it, Cindy, I forgave you the first time you asked me. It's time you forgive yourself. And, I always tell people, ask yourself, if this was your loved one that did whatever you did, would you be as hard on them as you are on yourself? And I've never heard anybody say yes to this day.
If they are, they're lying to themselves. So yeah, I love it. I love it. Cindy, I always ask all the people that I interview to give my audience 3 tips that they can use in their life today to make a difference, what would your 3 tips be?
Number one is be aware of your thoughts. We have over 50,000 thoughts a day. And if you take a timer and you just, every time the timer goes off, you jot down what you're thinking. If you do this for a few days up to a week, you're going to be shocked of the thoughts that you have repeatedly. And these thoughts are going to really affect your life and the way you show up in this world. The second thing is just to learn to love yourself. I mean, as kooky as it sounds, it's like we don't love ourselves enough. So one of the things is just like looking, if you look in the mirror every day, whenever you're brushing your teeth, just say, I love you, Cindy. I love you, Cindy. I love you, Cindy. And as you do it, look at your pupils of your eye as you're doing this, because we feel that shame and that unworth because we don't love ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so important to love yourselves. And third is just be kind to other people. That really makes a difference. When you do a good deed for somebody else, then that makes you feel happy. That makes other people you feel happy. And it's this butterfly effect, right? This ripple effect where people start doing nice things for each other. And I have to add a fourth thing, which is gratitude. Regardless where you are and what's happening, if you can find something to truly be grateful for every single day, and it can be anything. I'm often like, I'm in awe of nature. I can look at nature and be grateful for everything. Like I've sat there and I've watched like ants for 30 minutes, just being grateful for, hey, the way they work together and they walk in a straight line, right? So whenever you do that, but also you be grateful for somebody saying they love you or somebody giving you a compliment. So every day when you wake up, ask yourself, what can I find today to be grateful for? And just before you go to sleep, replay in your mind the things that happened that day that you're grateful for. And this changes everything. I think learning and being grateful is magical.
I love that. I love that. And I am all about kindness. If you can't be kind, don't be anything. Don't say anything. Don't do anything. Just keep on your own path. Stay in your own lane. So now here's the final question. And it's not a question, but it's something I have all my interviewees do. Sit back, close your eyes, take a deep breath in, and I want you to connect to your inner 5-year-old child. And what would she say of how far you've come today?
She's very happy with how far I've came today and how much I've released. And even that at 5 years old, I wanted to teach, I wanted to help other people. And I've actually fulfilled that with coaching people. And especially, I believe I'm going to reach more people with my book.
I love that. But she's also, there was times when you wanted to give up, but you stood in your power when you figured out what your power was. And she said, you helped me at 5. You helped your 10-year-old, you helped your 15-year-old, you helped your 20-year-old by standing in that power of that one time. And when you received your power back, it helped ignite the flame inside of you to be able to write these books, to make a difference. And your book is called Overcoming Dark Family Secrets. I encourage everybody, go to Amazon, look it up. It's Cindy J. Holbrook. And I'm honored to have you here today.
Thank you. If you just Google or you just the URL, Overcoming Dark Family Secrets, right now that's going to take you to a page where you can click on the Amazon link and purchase the book. But also I have a lot of friends and colleagues that have offered other gifts for you. So you may want to look that over as well.
Well, I'll make sure to put that in your description as far as your cindyjholbrook.com. Is that where it's at?
It's there too, cindyjholbrook.com. Yes.
So thank you for being here. We have parallel lives and many understandings, and I'm honored that victims are taking their power back and taking that love for themselves and showing others how they can love themselves enough not to tolerate it.
Yes. And yeah, thank you, Chris. It's definitely been a pleasure. And I think that Um, so often, the people in our age group, when we've taken our power back, we have so much life and lessons to help younger people to where that will in time help change the world.
I agree with that. I agree. Hang on one second. It takes a special kind of individual to dream their thoughts and ideas and turn it into their reality. Cindy J. Holbrook, you've done just that. You stepped past your fears. You stayed the course. You had the courage to do the follow through. Cindy J. Holbrook, you've championed yourself. Now we know who you've become. Thank you for sharing your ideas, your thoughts, and your dreams with us today, and your book. I am extremely honored and grateful that you're here today.